Hello, and welcome to NACC's February member webinar. My name is Kristen Pisani-Jax, and I am the Training Director at NACC, and I'm excited to welcome you to today's topic, Predictive Models in Child Welfare and Juvenile Justice. We are excited to be joined by our presenter, Matthew Trail of the Max Planck Institute for Research on Collective Goods. We really want to encourage an interactive presentation with lots of questions and comments. So Matthew encourages you to use the chat and Q&A throughout so we can take your questions and get to your comments throughout today's session. And without further ado, I'm going to turn it over to Matthew.
Hi, thank you all for taking time to come listen to me today. I am in Bonn, Germany at the moment, and the building that you can see on the screen is where I'm standing. It's the Max Planck Institute. We do a lot of behavioral law and behavioral economics here. I myself am a former foster care attorney. I'm licensed in Florida and Texas and spent 15, 16 years representing children's foster care attorney ad litem before I gave up that glamorous lifestyle to come be a researcher. You all are going to get a PowerPoints, like I'm going to give you these slides, but there's slides that have been sent as well that have all the text and the citations and things. So you've got it. These slides I'm going to give you are going to be mostly pictures and nonsense. So just bear with me, but you've got all the important stuff. So first off, thank you all so much for those of you who have taken my survey. I really appreciate it. I can see in the last 24 hours, I've gotten a lot of responses. I don't know how many of you there are out there that haven't taken it. I'm confident that you all are competent attorneys who can handle multiple things. So if you want to take it right now, feel free to also take the survey now. I'll check again for the survey for this presentation's over to see if you have taken it, and I'll call you out if you've not. So what are we going to talk about today? We're going to talk about algorithms and predictive models and child welfare. I want to take you through what those look like. I'll talk to you a little bit about how they're used in child welfare and how they're used in juvenile justice. Talk a little bit about predictive policing, and then we, of course, are attorneys, so we should talk about legal issues. And no presentation would be complete without also some ethical implications as well. So we'll go all through these things. Now, I do want to highlight that there's a lot of these out there. There are a ton of algorithms that are touching your clients in ways that you probably are not aware of. And I'm going to highlight some of the best known / controversial ones today and give you a little bit in depth about them, but then briefly touch on some others. I may miss one that you were hoping I talk about. I apologize, but there's just so many of these out there. What I hope you do take away is that there's a model affecting your client's life right now, and maybe you don't know it exists. So like Kristen said, I can't speak for 90 minutes. So I really want you all to come in with questions, and I hope we can have some conversation through the chat so that I've put places for you to ask questions throughout this. So please feel free to ask questions as we go through it. Now, before we talk about algorithms, we do have to take a little bit of a sidebar, and we need to talk about storm giants. I know this seems like it's off topic. Trust me, we're going to get back on topic, but so we need to talk about storm giants. And specifically, I want to talk about the height of storm giants. And this fellow here in the middle is a storm giant, by the way. This is an official Dungeons & Dragons size chart, so you know that it's accurate. And so let's say you has been asked by King Brunord Battlehammer to learn about the height of storm giants. And again, I promise this is going to get back to predictive models. Just bear with me. So you're a good demographer. You've done this before. And so you know you need to gather 400 storm giants at least to get a good confidence interval of 95%. And that will tell you the average height of storm giants in the population. So you take these 400 storm giants and you measure their height, and you've come up with this distribution chart. So you've got a pretty good idea, 95% that you found the mean. It's a little more complicated than that, but for simplicity, that's what we're looking at. But then the King Brunord Battlehammer asks you another question. He wants to know, how tall is Grokster? He's part of your sample of storm giants. And so based on this information that you have, can you all give me an answer for how tall storm giants are, or how tall Grokster is? And you can put the poll up if you don't mind. Do we have enough answers? Okay, cool. So yeah, I'm glad you chose bigger than a hill giant, smaller than a dragon. That's definitely the correct answer. But also the other correct answer is between 22 and 30 feet. We actually don't really know much about Rockstar based on the sample of hill giants. I mean, of storm giants. I apologize to calling them a hill giant. And this, what I'm trying to get you, Ben, this is how it ties back to predictive modeling, is we can take these measurements about a whole host of storm giants. We can measure their weight, their beard length, how many gnomes they can smash in one hit. And we take those averages and we can build a model at them. And it'll tell us a lot about storm giants in general, but does not tell us much about Rockstar, the storm giant. And so there's a statistical truism. You can read this, that the mean of a distribution tells us about everyone and yet no one. And keep that in mind as we talk about predictive models, because these models are built based on the means of population, then making predictions back towards an individual. This next slide is basically about how most machine learning gets done. If you guys have never checked out this comic, you should sure check it out because it's generally funny, and maybe it's more funny if you're a researcher. But anyway, so I want you now to picture an algorithm in your head. I want you to just think of an algorithm. Does it look something like this? Is this kind of what you're thinking of? Kind of a long equation with Greek letters. You probably forgot what these letters meant back in high school or college, if you got that far. I know we're lawyers, we're famously bad at math. And this is what an algorithm could look like, but I'm going to show you some other things that algorithms could look like. And they're everywhere. You know them. Netflix, your Google, Amazon, even a recipe for a simple recipe to make creme brulee. That's an algorithm. An algorithm is just a set of instructions to produce an outcome. And usually those set of instructions are do something and something else, do something or something else, do something, not this other thing. And that's all an algorithm is. Like it gets bandied around as this like fancy word, and it can be complicated. I don't want to make you think they're all simple. They can be complicated, but they're also simple instructions. And I don't want you to be scared when you hear them. They're not magic. They're just directions is a better word to think of when you hear the word algorithm. And algorithms are often used to build predictive models. And predictive models have proponents and opponents, and the proponents will argue it's like Minority Report with Tom Cruise, and there's elaborate science going on, and the claim that it makes us see a better future and helps us make decisions. And the opponents would basically say it's not a lot better than fortune telling. Tarot cards, maybe even worse because there's some biases built into it. But at its heart, predictive modeling is just taking data that we have on current events, on historical data, and using it to predict an outcome for future or known events, using it to make a best guess of what we think is going to happen. We do this all the time. Humans have done this forever. I mean, the weather prediction is basically a predictive model. It's a good concept. It's useful for a lot of human endeavors. So if you hear me being critical of predictive models and some of this that I'm going to tell you about, keep in mind these are useful. We want them to work. And to build these, the reason we do these is because hopefully they give us better accuracy and they help us make decisions. If you all are working in the child welfare world, then I'm sure you're not happy with the decisions being made there now. I know I was never happy with the decisions being made on behalf of my clients. And so the idea is to make better decisions. We take out a lot of the noise, we take out a lot of the chaos, and we try to make nothing but natural 20 critical hits. If you can't tell, I'm going to make lots of D&D references throughout this, so I hope you like Dungeons and Dragons. So that's what we build these things for, to make better models, to make better decisions, and they're useful for that. To build them, though, you need big data. You need lots of data, and hopefully lots of data from different places. Some of this data might come from hospitals, it might come from Medicaid records, from health records, it might come from courts, it might come from your juvenile case, from a child welfare case, from a family law case. It also might come from police, arrest records, conviction records, records about neighborhood problems. It comes from schools, expulsions, suspensions, even problems in schools. All these records can be used to build a model for child welfare. And as you will see, some of them have been used to build models for child welfare. But there are obviously a little bit of problems with some of these things. So again, I like this comic strip. If I assign numbers, these things becomes math, and I can do that, and I can do math on it. And so we're taking this information, we're taking medical records, we're taking school records, we're taking court records, and we're building a model to predict something that's going to happen to a child. And maybe we're trying to predict whether or not the kid's going to be in danger, whether or not they're going to be neglected or abused. But humans build those models, and so they have to make decisions about what the weights and factors are. So if you were building a model to determine if a child is going to be neglected or abused, how much is a child's tardiness from school worth? How do you weigh that? How much weight do you give that to your model? How about if a parent is arrested for a DUI? How weighty is that for predicting that a child is going to be abused or neglected for a risk model? So humans build these models, and we make human choices. So I'd like to put a question out there to you all. Can somebody think about some potential issues when building a model? Can you guys give me something in the chat, somebody's thoughts about things that you might run into if you're trying to build one of these models? Those are both good answers. I see racial bias and bad data. Agreed. Racial bias, bad data, those are all things. Let me get back to this question in a second. So you guys kind of read my next slide. So bias in, bias out. Those are some very things that come in common. Models are based on assumptions. You see, I don't even need this presentation. You already know the problems with these models. But we have both intrinsic and extrinsic biases, and if those biases are part of our if they're part of the information that we're putting in, then the models will just reflect them back to us. And so we have to be very careful when we build these models that we're not just taking our own problems, our own societal problems, and putting them back in. And hold on, I see another answer up here. Yeah, they're all based on assumptions. There's things that go into the models that count for individual nuances. You guys are doing great on this. Yeah, good job. Also take my survey. As someone said, bad data, antiquated data. That was another good. You had that in the comments. Data can notoriously be bad in child welfare. I know. One of the first times I went and saw one of my clients' files, and it was a meter wide and just full of documents for the last like 15 years, IEP meetings and medical records and court records. And to assume that all of that is correct, that everything was entered in that is probably not true. And then to assume that someone who put it into a model entered it correctly is another problem. And then also, of course, antiquated data. That perhaps some of the data was even good in 2011 when it was first put in there, but that data is no longer useful for us at this point. And so, yeah, those are great answers. Let me see another kind of comment. Insufficient sample size. Yeah, that's another great thing, that we don't take enough samples. And one of the problems with building these models is, if New York City wants to build a model, they might have the resources to build one. But if Murfreesboro, Tennessee, my hometown, wants to build a model, they don't have the resources. They don't, maybe not necessarily the money resources, but even the computer programmers to build them. And so where the data is taken from makes a big deal as well. And what human individuals are building that data makes a big deal. So continuing with my dork trend, predictive models are more like the foundation novels and the hero Harry Seldon's Psychohistory, where we take data and predict human behavior. Although he was predicting civilizations, and this is still trying to predict human beings' individual behavior. So questions about how we build models, about what an algorithm is, about biases in them? Do we have anybody want to talk? I'm going to go on to the next things, but I want to give you a chance to ask questions in this about this topic. Put them in the chat, please. Don't see any. Wait, hold on, here, I guess. Okay, yeah. Okay, it seems like you guys are cool with this part, so we will move on. So when I told you before that there's lots of models out there, I'm serious. This is a map that the ACLU did from one of their report just last year, and they were looking at models that were being used or had been used, currently used, thinking about used in the United States, and I think they had 27 states that were using it. They were mostly looking at child risk models. And what I'm going to tell you is that child risk is one way that these algorithms are used, but they're used in much more ways. So every state on this map should be lit up in some form or fashion because these models are touching your clients in some way, even if it's not necessarily a child risk model. But since we're talking about child risk models, then we should talk about the most famous, infamous one at the moment, Allegheny County, Pennsylvania. I don't know if there's any Pittsburgh attorneys in the audience, but there's a question. If all data is skewed and perfect, how can AI help us make decisions? Hey, Clark. I guess sorry, I got a question. So Clark asked if the data is skewed, how do we use AI to help us make decisions? Well, we hope not all of the data is skewed. Like there is decent data out there. Some of these models do decent things, and even if they're not perfect, if they help us make decisions just a little bit better, if they improve our decision making by 5% and they keep a kid out of care or help a kid that might be in danger, then I think they still have value. But the data problem is an ongoing problem with all of these things, with all of the systems, and it's going to be a problem with basically every model we build, but we keep building them. So back to Allegheny County. So Allegheny County rolls out this Allegheny County Family Screening Tool. It was rolled out, I think, 2016, and it's supposed to predict if a child will be taken in by the agency sometime within the next 2 years. Now, those of you will notice that's not the same thing as abuse or neglect. It's actually a guess about what the actual child welfare agency itself will do, not necessarily harm coming to the kid, but they had to pick something, so they went with that. I think you all know what intakes look like. I'm sure you do. Under traditional model, that someone makes a hotline call, it gets screened in or screened out, and it goes to a caseworker supervisor. They either make a substantiation finding or not. Under the Allegheny County model, this kind of same screening comes in, but Allegheny County has built this integrated data system, and they're pulling from child welfare records and from police records and medical records and other county records. And so the call screener makes a decision on the intake, but then they get this score, and it looks like this thing on the right where you see this family screening score. It's a 1 to 20 number, somewhere between 15 and higher is considered high. It's mandatory screening. And basically then if a supervisor has to decide if they want to override the score or not. And the score's been used a lot. The score really hasn't come past the intake stage. Attorneys and judges are not seeing the score. Apparently, despite actually being pretty friendly with researchers for the data about this tool, this model, this number for particular clients is like a closely held secret. I'm not sure why attorneys and judges haven't pushed for it. I feel like you could get it under discovery, but it's apparently not been pushed for, and the agency is not super forthcoming with it. So Pittsburgh attorneys, I feel like you have a discovery fight on your hands somewhere down the road. Please get this score and figure out what's going on with it. Because one of the things that's happening is we don't actually know the weights and factors for this score. We don't quite know what goes into it, how you get a score of a 16 versus a score of a 5, how you get a score of a 10. What the research has shown us is that this score seems to be useful on kind of cusp cases that are hard for the caseworker to make it, for the intake worker to make a decision on. The ones that are not sure if they should screen in or screen out. The score seems to help them on that. As you might imagine, it was built with it was built with data, and so those biases that are in the data still appear. And so it does tend to show Black children being screened in and mandatory screening higher than white children. There's a higher ratio of minority kids being brought in by this tool. And one of the things that independent researchers has found is that the supervisors actually try to make an active effort to counter the racial bias that's kind of built into this model. The workers themselves, one of the things they found is the workers themselves don't really understand the model, and they face some organizational pressure to screen things in when you get the higher mandatory scores. Now, again, as I said, we want child welfare to make better decisions. We want kids to be not taken into care when they shouldn't be taken into care, and we want kids to be protected if they need protection. And so these models are flawed, but they're doing something that we're trying to do better. This one, I think, has some issues, but they all have some issues. And so looks like I've got a question. Should be based on the state statute information supporting the internet, regardless of the score. Yeah, so it's not really the score is not determinative. The human beings still make the screen and out decision, but the score, and part of the way that they built this model was to make sure that the score didn't influence the case with the intake worker too much. So they don't see the score till after they've made their own decision. But then once you've got let's say you've decided to screen out, you're not going to bring the kid in. Once you get a score that says high or mandatory, then you're facing this pressure from this number, basically telling you that you might have made a mistake, or maybe not, or maybe it's reinforcing what you've already thought. Allegheny County decided to bring this model to the masses. It's not exactly the same model that they're using for the family screenings tool, but it's built by the same family of models. It's by the same people. And Hello Baby gives a score to literally every baby born in Allegheny County. I don't know if any of you live in the Pittsburgh area, and if your mothers, you might have gotten something in the mail, or basically suggesting these services. And this is considered a volunteer service, but you actually have to manually opt out of it. You have to go online and basically remove yourself from the list. Folks who come up with high-risk scores get visits from nonprofit social workers. It's not the child welfare social workers. They're from a different nonprofit, but some of those still might be mandatory reporters. And so there's some concern about basically pinning someone with a number and then sending them into child welfare care. It should be noted that the Department of Justice, like 2 weeks ago, as I was preparing these slides, I got an email, someone sending me the story, is investigating Allegheny County now for possible discrimination for using these models. I think they were looking at whether or not discriminate against people with disabilities. I've actually not heard that, but I think that's possible. I don't think the model is built to discriminate against people with disabilities. I mean, they put that in the model, but since they're drawing from other databases and other factors that also correlate with disability, it's possible that could be happening. I don't know. So at this point, you're probably thinking, well, I don't live in Pittsburgh. It's not affecting me. Who cares what happens in Allegheny County? This model is on tour. It is traveling the country now. It is being piloted, used also in Larimer County, in Douglas County, Colorado. It's also in Los Angeles. I did not put Los Angeles on the map, but just so you guys know where it is. Yes. So this model is being adopted and piloted by other jurisdictions. It's not the same model exactly. It's built with data from local jurisdictions. And again, the research on these jurisdictions is showing that caseworkers seem to like it for close cases, but they don't. It might also be slightly bringing in more people screened in. Folks that might have otherwise got screened out might be getting screened in. you might now be asking yourself, where did this model come from? How did it get here? And this is just my excuse to show you pictures from my trip to New Zealand. But all of this has its origins in New Zealand. It was piloted there in 2012-ish in the Auckland region. And the Kiwis, in their wisdom, decided they did not want the model anymore. There were some concerns about biases and testing on children and just the accuracy. And they essentially kicked it out, and here it is in the States. I was fortunate to do a research stay in New Zealand where I talked to one of the ladies who was against the model down there. I'll talk about her a little bit some more, but also these are pictures I took. Everyone should go to New Zealand. It's beautiful. This is a penguin that I saw. Question in chat. What have been the most effective programs to demonstrate prevention of serious injury and fatalities? Like two children in care, or two children? As to what questions and answers are on these models. So no, that's one of the things that I don't know. Okay. First, let me answer the first question. I don't know if any of the models are super great about predicting injuries and fatalities. That's the point of the Allegheny County model and the ones that are used in Douglas County and et cetera. Whether or not they are a lot better at preventing injury and fatalities, I don't have any data on that. I could not tell you if they're better at that or not. I don't think anyone's looked specifically at that question. The second question from Kimberly: do you have information as to what questions and answers are on these models? Again, no, we don't quite know what the factors are that go into these models, or what information is pulled from them. They've updated this model since it first got piloted, so there's some difference. They're working on the model continuously, which is a good thing, but I don't know what goes into it. Have fatality sentinel injuries gone down in these areas? I don't know the answer to that. If fatalities are going in the areas, this is actively being studied. There are lots of researchers that are looking at Allegheny County and looking at Douglas County. Whether or not it's actually reduced fatalities and injuries, I don't know. I actually don't even remember that question particularly. But if somebody, Clark, if you're out there, if you know the answer to that question, please put it in the comments, because I don't know the answer to that question. So you guys are already at the questions part, which is what the next screen was. So are there more questions related to this model? I'm sorry, I don't know the answer to the one about the fatalities. That is an interesting question. I'm going to make a note to try to find the answer to that. I don't think it's in any of the literature that I've seen. Does anybody have any other? Okay, here's another one in the chat. So does the fact that these models predict the likelihood of reporting and future agency for both? So some folks would say that. I don't. You can see the question in the chat. If the fact that these are based on like what the agency is going to do, does it preclude them from being good? That's one of the primary criticisms that's aimed at these models, that they're not actually predicting child neglect or injury. They're predicting what the agency itself is going to do. And yeah, that's a legitimate criticism. There's no good, I don't think the model people have a great answer for that. When independent researchers were asking the intake workers, the screen-in workers, what they thought about that, they actually themselves had some doubts about whether or not the model predicting what the agency is going to do in 2 years was a good indicator of child abuse or neglect. And so even the people using this model have that same question. Anything else? Okay, then let's talk about, I told you the main factors in the Allegheny County model. We don't really know, they've not been released. What is the research you are referencing? In my slides and the other slides there, I've got research. I've got my notes and my citations that are in there. And so this is my pretty picture slides, because I didn't want to make you read 100 slides of text. But in my other slides, I've got the research and the citations in them. So hopefully you can find it there. I told you we don't know exactly what's going into the Allegheny family model, but we do have some ideas what the New Zealand model looked like. And so I'd like you guys to take a minute to see if you can guess which factors the New Zealand model ranked as indicating that a child might be in neglect or danger. So can anybody get some guesses and put them in the chats? So poverty, yeah. Previous history, child welfare, prior neglect, yep. You guys have clearly represented a kid before. Parent was incarcerated. So the addiction is all good guesses. Some of them are right on. Child disability, these, yeah, all good guesses. Mental health, substance abuse. So in the New Zealand model, this is it. Single parents, length of time of poverty, and prior involvement child welfare system. Those are the three main predictive factors about whether anybody could use, whether a child might be in neglect or risk of neglect or abuse. And I suspect this is not, none of this is super crazy to you. You are making these exact guesses. And so this model really wasn't telling us anything that we didn't already know about child welfare. Anyone who represented a kid for over a year knows these things. There's also concern in the New Zealand model, and this is true, I think, mainly in all the models, that some stuff comes off as binary. You know, for instance, like drug use is reported as a binary data. And I think we can hopefully agree that there's a difference between smoking pot on the weekend when your kids aren't there versus doing meth in the room and passing out in front of them. And those are different. But if the box gets clicked as drug use, it gets clicked as drug use. Yeah, so this was, let me show you next. But see, some of these models are being used for other things as well. So there are pilot models, and these are the ones I actually think are kind of cooler and maybe more useful to us, who are trying to predict placement and stability. So that we're moving away from risk models. We're trying to see if a child is at risk, and we're talking about a kid who's already in care, and we want to know, are they going to disrupt a placement? Are they going to be stable in their placement? And so there is a pilot that was done with some Texas researchers in Tennessee. There's a model based out of Kansas that they try to do this as well. And there's also some researchers at Chapin Hall who are looking at runaways. And again, let's see if you guys can guess some of the factors that might lead to each client to be unstable, to disrupt a placement. Put them in the chat. Physical violence, prior abuse history, definite, interesting. Mental health issues. I feel like you guys must have represented child foster clients before, because you on the right track. And so the next one, lack of resource, lack of support, drug trafficking. So the actual things that they found there were factors in all of these studies for influencing placement, for relating to placement and stability, or age of admission. You know, is it a teenager versus a 4 or 5 year old? The number of prior placements. You know, is this your kid's second placement, or is it their 17th placement? Do they have siblings that are living with them? Have they run away before? Do they have aggression, acting out behaviors? Are they throwing tables and smashing holes in foster parents' walls? And which is related to the mental health issue also. And so these are all factors that the researchers found led them to predict when a child might disrupt their placement. And again, as you guys are putting in the comments, this is not surprising to us. This is anyone who's done this job, who's represented kids anywhere, is going to know these things. Any social worker who's good at their job is going to know these things. Any judge who knows what they're doing is going to know these things. I bet you know right now which of your clients are at risk of having placement instability, which of your clients are at risk of disrupting their placement in the next week. I bet you already know who those clients are. But so the question I want to ask you, though, would having a model help you? If let's say you're in Texas, if the University of Texas produced a model that said, we've run this through all of these databases, and we've now determined that Andre is going to disrupt placement. He's going to be put in a mental health hospital. He's going to put him in a mental hospital. He's going to run away if we don't order services within the next 3 months. would that be useful to you as practitioners, even if it's information you already know? And I'd really like to hear your opinions on this, because I think so please put that in the chat. Is anybody chatting? Oh, there we go. Only if the agency is relying upon it. Yeah, it's probably coming from the agency, is where it's coming from. Not helpful without resources to avoid services disruption. It could be probably the models. I'm reading Martha's question. The models will probably be based on the child's behavior, although there actually are some models that are trying to look to basically, the model out of Kansas is trying to look at both foster homes and the child and make a placement about where the child will be the most stable based on both of those factors. I suspect you all also know who your good foster parents are in your communities and which ones will put up a kid and which ones will not. But so the idea of having this thing out there, whatever thing I think would be helpful, support case law, increased likelihood of disrupting placement, allow us to advocate for additional support, allowing kids to take their pets with them. And it's clear it's an unique promotional, but not turning factor, breaking factor in placement. Having so much becomes self-fulfilling, said it would act like it get the services needed without the prediction. Yeah, no, I agree. There's I think that's a good idea. Problem that these things are self-fulfilling. I would say that we kind of know it's self-fulfilling in some ways anyway. We already know which clients are going to have trouble and which ones are bursting at placement. I was talking to another researcher the other day, and we were trying to ask him the same question. And one of the things that we came up with is we were both kind of complaining about being attorneys and having bad judges. And I thought one of these might be useful with a bad judge. I'm sure some of you all practice in front of judges who just don't get foster care, punish foster kids just for kind of being foster kids for the trauma that they've had. And so I thought perhaps when I was practicing, if I'd had a piece of paper that I could have taken to my bad family law judge and said, Judge, the University of Texas says if you don't order these services and do this thing that I'm asking you to do, which you all probably know anyway, then bad things are going to happen. That might have been useful to me. I don't know. Maybe you all don't think so. I think that's one of the more interesting places that these models can come up. So what's else in the chat? Yeah, personnel issues can impact the person's involved in placement. Failing expecting action, nothing in return. Yeah, it could. All these things are valid concerns. What I'm telling you is these models are coming. They might not get to you yet. They might not be in your jurisdiction yet, but I think these models are coming. And these are the good child welfare models, the ones that might help us decide if a kid needs extra services. So this is not the first time that these models have been tried. This is actually kind of round 2 for some of these predictive models. California tried a model from a proprietary place called SAS and kicked it out after a year. Also, Illinois pretty famously kicked out Eckerd rapid response model. Both of them were getting way too many false positives and false negatives. They're basically saying thousands of kids were at imminent risk, and then a few that actually were at risk the model didn't predict. Eckerd, by the way, recently got kicked out of Florida counties for just bad foster care in general. So I think maybe they should do something else as a company and stop being in the foster care world. Okay, so there's another one called Predict Align Predict. This is a Dallas company that's trying to model in different places, and it is a geospatial mapping predictive model. So essentially, they look at a city and they decide what places have the most need for social services, the most need for children in care, and then they try to assign social workers to that city. The ACLU, as many of you probably are thinking to yourself, this just sounds like a poverty map. The ACLU was very concerned about this model because it just sounds like a poverty map. The developers are for sure 100% that it's not a poverty map, you can be your own judge for it. I'm gonna get to the comments in a second. I'll come to questions here in a minute. Just so you think that this isn't just an American problem, the Dutch government literally collapsed because they built such a bad algorithm. They developed an algorithm to determine if people were stealing public benefits, if people were falsely claiming public benefits when they weren't, because they were afraid that people were taking money when they shouldn't have been taking it. And when they built this, one of the things they put as a factor was whether or not the person receiving public benefits had a Muslim last name. That literally made it into the algorithm. And so, as you might imagine, this algorithm flagged a bunch of people that didn't do anything other than having Muslim last names. And it identified them as potential wealth, basically public benefits thieves. In response to that, the Dutch government came in and said, oh, you must be thieves, we're gonna take your kids away. And so it took like 1,000 kids into care based on this algorithm that was super biased from the very, very beginning. It literally was such a big scandal, it caused the collapse of the Dutch government. They got better, they reformed. But now they're paying out hundreds of millions of dollars to the families that were affected that should have never been targeted by this algorithm to begin with. Lastly, and then I'll get to the questions. If you have to take any of these models and bring them to your state, bring this one. Georgia started this about 10 years ago, maybe a little bit longer than that, I guess now. It's called the Cold Case Project. And they basically run a predictive model on the cases in Georgia, determining when a kid is going to age out poorly without support. And I think this is the best use of algorithms for. I think Georgia gets a gold star on this. If you want to take a model and use it for good, I think this is the one to use. Take this to all the states. So I can do questions now, and I see there's like 8 comments in the chat. So let me get to it. Let me look back here. What needs to be there for a better attorney? So, one, if there's more questions about these algorithms that just predictive models that just discussed, send them along. So Amy asked, are there distinctions in perception effectiveness between those run by private or for-profit whose algorithms are proprietary and public and transparent programs? There definitely are. So there are distinctions. One of the things, and we're going to get to the ethics at the end of the presentation, but one of the main recommendations for some of the ethical models is that they not be run by private companies, or if they're run by private companies, they're run by private companies with complete transparency. And so one of the great criticisms for a lot of these models is that they're proprietary. And the ones I showed you from California and Illinois were both proprietary for both private companies, and those both failed spectacularly. And then we're going to talk about one in a criminal law context as well that's also private. How long ago was the Netherlands predictive model generated? I think this was 2012. I'd have to 2012-ish. I think the scandal, like the model was running for a few years, and then somewhere in 2015 or so, there was a big scandal, and that crashed it was such a big scandal, the Dutch government, like the bunch of the ministers resigned and they reformed the government as they do in Europe, which is the failed California model. SAS was the name of it, and SAS is, I can't remember what SAS stands for. It's a company that does a lot of predictive modeling and algorithm, and it does more than just foster care. They try to do other things as well. It was Los Angeles that piloted it and got rid of it. It only lasted for about a year. New structured decision making assessment. Your thoughts about that? So the structured decision making and CANS models, those are algorithms. Those are the actuarial version of these. I think attorneys, we kind of understand those because we've seen them before. The research on structured decision making and CANS is mixed. Unfortunately, this research on lots of these things is mixed. It has positives. When used correctly, it can have positive impacts. Although you probably already know this, but caseworkers and people that use them have learned how to manage them in some ways. So there's research that folks actually know how to like put the numbers they need to get the outcome that they want in them, which makes them not particularly valid. When the researchers were looking at Tennessee about whether or not they could predict stability, they tried to use CANS as the factor for that to see if that would help, and that model failed, and so it didn't work for that. structured decision-making, PANS, those are the early versions of what we're seeing now. And I think they have the same problems that what we're seeing, useful, but not always useful. Is any other questions about these models that we've talked about, or before I move on to juvenile justice? Okay, so juvenile justice. Oh, I see one more question. Let me see if I can see that in the chat. A little bit about the Georgia examples that use predictive analytics to help identify youth who would age of careless permanencies. Yes, that is. This was Jennifer's question. Yes, they're using predictive analytics to help identify youth who would age out of care without permanency, so they can. And so essentially, they use this model. They identify children who are at risk, and then they assign a team of what I can only imagine are Georgia super lawyers and super social service people to try to change that outcome. And I wish there was some actual good studies done on this model. I honestly was a year into studying predictive models before I even found this Georgia model, but I think it's very cool. And one of the things that I think you should think about these models is what's the worst thing that happens if the model is wrong? And this is something I was talking to another researcher, Daniel, the other day about. We were discussing, like, what's the worst thing happens? And he was saying, the worst thing happens if this Georgia model is wrong is you've given a kid extra services they didn't need. And so I think that's a valuable thing. So I do like this Georgia example. I think this one should be replicated. Now, apparently it was built by very friendly Georgia billionaires. So maybe you need to find very friendly billionaires in your state to help build one and fund it. So Judith asked, can you discuss the use of internal and external ethic boards and use of predictive analytics, both in child welfare and juvenile justice? I can, Judith. Can we save that question for a little bit later? Let me get to it. So juvenile justice. So we all know there's lots of overlaps between foster kids and children in child welfare. We mostly see these risk assessments. We mostly see them come in juvenile justice and pure juvenile justice in the form of risk assessments. And most of those risk assessments are about probation or release. They're about recidivism. Now, NACC has been doing this for like 30 years. They've got this juvenile detention alternative initiatives program that they've been modeling, trying to basically fix the risk assessments that jurisdictions have been using. They're each built locally. They've come some of this common design that they use for all of them, but they're all kind of built with local data. According to their data, that's in 300 locations, 39 states. They claim that over the last 30 years, they've cut in half the number of kids being detained, with kept out like 90,000 of them out of detention. They do note that this thing is not cured bias. There's still minority children are being brought in at a higher rates than white children, even in the jurisdictions with their model. But they also know that crime has fallen in some of the jurisdictions, but sounds more correlational than causal. But unfortunately, not all of your jurisdictions are being monitored and helped by the Casey Foundation, who do, I think we do really good work around the country. Some of them use less great models. And so this SAVRI, Structured Assessment of Violence and Risk in Youth, is used apparently in multiple jurisdictions. And I'll be honest, I'm not a juvenile justice attorney. I represented foster kids, and there was obviously a lot of crossover. I was in juvenile court, but this is not my expertise. But the SAVRI model is used in apparently lots of places. One of the places it was used is it's in Washington, D.C. It's basically a risk assessment, uses 24 items of risk and 6 items of protection, again, about recidivism, but it doesn't really predict about violence. It's not really built for that. And so there was a recent Washington, D.C. case where a kid was supposed to get probation, and then they ran him through this SAVRI assessment, said he was a violent risk and not eligible for probation. His attorneys challenged it under Daubert. Apparently the judge allowed SAVRI to be excluded in that case, but didn't exclude it across every other case, because basically not heard any other complaints about it. And one of the things you should know is that this SAVRI doesn't really have a good peer review for the type of prediction it was being used. So it has some scientific peer review for recidivism, but not for like basically predicting violence. So it was being used inappropriately. One of the other problems with this model is that it doesn't have an error rate. And so we don't really know how it's biased against minorities. And the shorter part. So let me look at the question. Let's chat and comment up here. Yeah, okay, that's Kristen. So back to Judith's question. She said, Judith asked, can you discuss the use of internal and external ethics boards and the use of predictive analytics both in child welfare and juvenile justice? So they are better when they're built with stakeholders from outside. Internal board, we're going to talk a little bit more about this in the ethics session, but they need outside stakeholders, they need people with lived experience, and I'm going to argue, well, I'll say it right now to ruin the surprise, but I'm going to argue they need us. They need attorneys being part of these boards as well. The internal ones don't have the maybe just too much internal yes speak going on. I hope that's some of the answer. Can you repeat the jurisdiction where Dalbert challenge was made? Savary, name of the case. It's in Washington, D.C. If you will look in the text-heavy PowerPoints that you have, that's there. It's got the name of the case. All of these cases that I'm referencing now are from it's called a litigating algorithms report, because none of these are published cases. They're just like cases that are out there that people are interested in. But it has the name of the case, and it's, again, Washington, D.C. Does anybody have any other questions about juvenile justice stuff? Any of these algorithms, I mean, these models in juvenile justice? Okay, then we will go on to predictive policing, which is a doozy. So predictive policing, same idea as these other ones. You take a bunch of data from a bunch of different sources. You use these big data to predict crimes. And the police have developed these models, and they kind of like them. And there's been models developed in New York, and there's been models developed in Los Angeles, and models developed in Chicago, and models developed in New Orleans. There's even smaller. I think I read like Rochester developed a model. New York, I think LA stopped using theirs. New York is still using theirs. I couldn't find information about Chicago right beforehand, but one of the ways these models that often bring in juveniles is they bring in through these gang databases, and they've been criticized about this for years. One of the things that all four of these cities have in common is they've all been sued, mostly by civil rights organizations, about the workings of these models, about how the models work, about how about what factors and weights. You keep hearing me say the words factors and weights, but when you're building a model, that is the model, the factors and the weights. And so how these factors and weights work. But I want to turn your attention to, well, probably more of you live in these towns than in the next place. I do want to turn your attention to the most notorious one right now is in Pasco County, Florida. And this is north of Tampa, for those of you who do not live in Florida. And this is their motto that I took from online, Pasco County, your penny at work. I added the part about harassing family and kids. That was my editorial comment, as you might have guessed. Generally, I've been trying to present these to you as pretty neutral. I'm not taking a strong position on all of these models. This one I'm taking a position on, but I'll show you why. The Tampa Bay Times did an investigation of Pasco County. And so the Pasco County Sheriff's Office developed this model. They found that like 1,000 people in the county were bad criminals, according to the model. We gotta get them out of the county, essentially. And out of those 1,000, 100 of them were juveniles. And some of these juvenile kids had literally one charge, like one burglary, one theft, and they made it to this Pasco County Sheriff's Office super criminal list. And once they're on the list, the sheriff's department would come basically all hours of day and night, multiple times a month, and basically harass them. One of the police officers, and eventually actually admitted what the program was to kind of get people to leave the county. When the parents put up, at first the parents are like trying to accommodate the police officers, but then as this harassment continues, some of them start, to be a little bit more aggressive not aggressive against the police. Some of them give a little pushback, and the moment they give pushback towards the police, they end up with citations for their uncut grass or for a mailbox that's not the way a mailbox is supposed to look. And so some of the parents got records, even though the kids made on this list for crazy reasons. And I'm literally going to show you one of the things, and this is a list of predictive factors that Pasco County Sheriff's Office was using to when they were building this. And this is literally from their book. This is from their manual that's online. I don't know exactly what weight they give each one of these, but I did want to show you some of these. Obviously, being poor, we all know is, what can you do? Poor, you're definitely going to become a criminal. Another one is coming from a broken home. I know I come from a broken home. I don't know how I not lived into a life of crime this yet, but according to the Pasco County Sheriff's Office, I should be. Some of the other ones, being a victim of a crime. I love this one because it means, if the police officer said to come respond to you being a victim of a crime, then they're going to go ahead and put you on a list, or at least make that a factor in it. There's some other good ones, obviously low intelligence and poor school record. And again, this is from the Pasco County Sheriff's Office. And this is, of course, my favorite, hanging around in public, which, of course, is one of the most dangerous things any human being could possibly do in the world, is hang around in public, and always leads to crime. And so this is a nonsense not model. This is a nonsense model built with bad data using bad assumptions. The Germans have a word for this type of model, and it's called Scheisse. And so this is bad. And so I want you to take that one away. Are there any Florida attorneys out there are there any Florida attorneys out there who've experienced this model? Did anybody live near Tampa or have any have a client affected by this? I would. No, didn't look like it. You all are attorneys though, and so you can guess where this ended up. It is now in a lawsuit. Some of the parents from some of the children have filed a complaint, and I hope that they win a lot of money. One of the things that I think is extra disturbing about this particular model is Florida DCF, the Child Welfare Agency in Florida, shared data with the police, with the sheriff's office for this model. So foster kid information went into this model. Also, the school district shared information with the sheriff's office for this model, for this nonsense model. The school is being investigated by the DOE for possible FERPA violations, and also apparently lost $1 million in charity that they took back because they thought the school board misbehaved. I kind of think Florida DCF should be reprimanded as well. And you may be thinking, well, I don't live in Pasco County, Florida, but as you saw from beforehand, big cities and small cities around the country are developing these models, and they're sometimes targeting children. And so if this one's in your neighborhood, then you need to, this is also coming to your neighborhood if it's not already there. And so I've got some things in the chat. I'm gonna look at those, but also if people have questions about predictive policing. Yeah, yes, Germans have lots of words. That's right, Clark. This crosses over to their decision making. Yeah, that's. I think there's a ton of things wrong with this Pasco County model, and CPS sharing data. The idea that CPS is or DCF, I guess, in Florida is happily sharing data with the cops is nuts. Big picture, Frank. This is deep in activism and finding events right now. Pennsylvania is radioactive in our world. Yeah, and predictive algorithms be improved sufficiently to satisfy us. So Frank's question about can these things be made in the near future to satisfy you? No, I think is the short answer to that question. In the medium future, maybe, but I think we as practitioners, we as the people who represent kids have to be part of the ones building the algorithms. And I also talk about this a little bit later as well. I think we have to be the ones that fight the ones that are doing bad. So can Clark speak to whether predictive analytics is ever worth the downsides? Is it worth the downsides? Yeah, I think maybe. I'm not sure the police ones are. This is a bad one for me to answer that question on, because I think the police models are bad, and I'm not sure that those would ever be particularly good. But I think decision-making in foster care and child welfare is so bad right now anyway. I mean, I literally, part of the reason I'm studying this is because I was like so frustrated with people telling me what was in the best interest of my client. That if these models can be built well, I think they can help us. And so I hate to say that like we need to give these bad models time because the people are getting hurt in the process. But I do think at some point there's a model out there that can be useful. And so I'm not saying we should be patient with them if they're screwing our clients. We need to do something about that. But I do think there's a point where these models could be useful. Thank you, Laura, for the case citation. Oops, sorry, jumped too fast. So we are attorneys, and also, if any of you all have not taken my survey, please continue to do so. I do need to get as many responses as possible so I can do good statistics. So let's look at what does the law say, because we are attorneys. And I obviously started with the code of URNAMU, but you might be surprised, as we're trying to do in law school, that there was no mention of predictive models in this code. So we went with something a little more recent. There's also not particularly any good law about children as they're affected by predictive models. This is pretty new as far as legal goes. So we have to kind of look at adult law or at criminal law for adults. And to do that, we have to talk briefly about the COMPASS system. And COMPASS stands for Correctional Offender Management Profiling Alternative Sanctions. It's another recidivism model. It's based on predicting whether or not adult criminals will commit another crime. It's made by a company called Northpoint, which is a proprietary model. It's when we had a discussion about proprietary stuff already. And we don't know what the inner workings look like for it at all. It apparently uses 132 factors. Research shows that it's about 65% accurate in predicting if someone's going to commit another crime or not. Humans, when we tested just regular old humans, found they were about 67% accurate, and so using just 7 factors. And so for fun, Daniel, if you could throw up the other poll, let's see if you guys are smarter than COMPASS. There should be 3 questions to this as people answer. You can probably move on to the next one also. Okay, so the correct answer was no. This defendant did not commit another crime, but COMPASS guessed yes. So if you guessed no, you did better than COMPASS on that one. You want to try another one? So everybody got an answer for that one? So this one, COMPASS did better than you all did. So the correct answer was no. This defendant did not commit another crime. COMPASS actually guessed no as well. So COMPASS got this one right. And we'll do one more just to see if you guys can beat COMPASS one more time. Has everybody answered? So yes, so you were right. This defendant did commit another crime, and COMPASS guessed no. So I'd say for most of you all beat COMPASS in these in the thing it's supposed to do best. And there's actually a researcher who built a website, and I took that from this researcher's GitHub, basically asking these questions. You can take lots of defendants and see if you can beat COMPASS more regularly. This algorithm, this predictive model, research has shown is this is going to shock you, but it's biased towards minorities. It tends to rank Black offenders as more violent and more likely to commit crimes than does white offenders, which brings us to, and I'll see there's some stuff in the chat. I'll get to that in just a second. Which brings us to the only case on this, on algorithms as they affect individuals, is Loomis v. Wisconsin. It's obviously a fictional Loomis. Extra points if somebody knows where that character is from. Mr. Loomis was a registered sex offender, and he was charged with evading police. The Compass algorithm, when they put it toward him, suggested he would reoffend. He got 6 years in jail, partly because of the Compass score. He challenged this, saying, one, Compass is proprietary. I don't know what factors and weights went into this decision about me. He challenged it on gender, basically said the Compass algorithm takes gender into account, which it shouldn't. And three, challenged it on the idea that it was taking aggregate data about a bunch of different people and then making a prediction about him. You remember the storm giants? See, it comes back to it. So the Wisconsin Supreme Court heard these arguments, and they said, that all sounds cool, but we're going to keep Compass. But in order to keep it, we're going to let judges, we're going to give judges a warning first. So judges get to read a warning before they get exposed to this algorithm. And I'm going to let you read the warning because you guys can read faster than I can say all this, and it's in verbatim. So I'm just going to give you a few seconds to read this. Alicia, it is Halloween. Good job. So you guys probably had time to read all that. What do you think? Is that is it a good warning? Is it a bad warning? Do you think it's you think it works? Any thoughts in the chats? Cigarettes. Yes. So the warning doesn't particularly work yet. That's a good guess. The brilliant researchers actually here at the Max Planck Institute, where I'm at, my supervisor, Professor Dr. Christoph Engel, who also is an advisor to Pope. He just dropped that casually in conversation one day. And my colleague, Dr. Gritja Halacha, and I apologize if I messed up your last name. So they tested this very language. Humans respond to machine advice, but when a machine gives us advice, we listen. We're affected by it. And so what they found is that people can will actually change their mind if given machine advice that contradicts it. And it also, people will double down on their confidence if they're given advice that is what they thought to begin with. That warning, and they gave actually people that exact warning with the same test that you all just took about guessing if someone was going to commit another crime or not. And they found that advice does nothing to change people's verdict, nothing. It also doesn't improve accuracy. You don't get better at predicting whether or not someone's going to commit a crime or not to recidivate. Basically, if you get that warning, even when they added something to the warning, basically this Compass has low accuracy, people didn't respond to that as well. And so the warning, I mean, bless Wisconsin Supreme Court's heart for trying, but the warning really doesn't do anything. Let me see if we got some thing in the chat. Warning, it's a warning to the judge. It's Martha's questions. Is the judges before they get the Compass score, it's a warning they're supposed to read, to have. So is that surprising to you? And do you all think that would you expected the warning to work at all? No. Not surprising. Yeah, it didn't surprise my supervisor either when they did it, but they tested it on a bunch of people for the same thing. So there are moving away from Compass. There are some other cases that have looked at algorithms and how they affect other people. Again, but these are all adults, mind you. But so the ACLU took a Medicaid case in Idaho, this Armstrong case up here, where a predictive model had basically reduced benefits for people with intellectual disabilities. They challenged the model successfully. The case settled, although they didn't note that the model actually helped some folks get more benefits, even though it hurt their clients that they were representing. So that's what I keep telling them. The results of models are mixed. There's an Arkansas case where Arkansas Legal Aid challenged a model that basically like eliminated nursing hours across the state. Private duty nursing, I think they capped them at like 8 hours or something nonsense like that. And if any of you have represented a kid or anybody who needed like round the clock nursing, you know, if only having 8 hours of care is dangerous. Someone could die. And so I think this case settled easier. But this is also a bad model that basically yanked nursing hours from everybody. The third case is an Oregon case, and Disability Rights Oregon took this case. And so shout out to disability rights community as a former disability rights Texas lawyer. Good job, guys. Also went after an algorithm that also was reducing benefits on disability, and they also were able to settle that case. Now, if you might have noticed, one of the common themes of all these were Medicaid and medical cases, and we all know the kids in care, Medicaid touches them all the time. And so when I said that like there's an algorithm messing or affecting your client, there's for sure a Medicaid algorithm floating out there doing something about your client. Maybe for good, maybe for bad, but this is the place where you might see it the fastest. There are, as far as other law goes, there is a White House proposal to limit the ability of algorithms to make some to affect people's lives. I have to look at the proposal again, but I kind of assumed it's a White House proposal and won't go anywhere. There is the EU has the General Data Protection, Article 22, which prevents governments from making decisions solely based on an algorithm. Our friends to the north in Canada, there's a Canadian Supreme Court case, Everett v. Canada. And again, all this is in the other PowerPoint material that went out, where an Indigenous inmate challenged one of the models used in the correctional facilities because the model wasn't built with Indigenous people in mind. And the Canadian Supreme Court actually upheld it. They kicked out this model. And so at least the Canadians are paying attention. There actually is, I hesitate to mention it because I'm not sure how it's connected, but there's currently a Supreme Court case. It is about the Communications Decency Act and about how Google's algorithm represents terrorism. I don't really know that much about the case. It has nothing to do with any of the law that we practice, but whether or not the Supreme Court in the next month or so says something about algorithms, maybe. Keep your eye out. We'll see. There's questions, and I see some things in the chat, and also some questions in the Q&A. Let me look at those, and you guys, if you have any thoughts. How do I get the manuscript? Lori, what manuscript? I'm not sure I understand that question. Let me look at the questions and then the questions and answers. Sorry, I was trying to get to some of this other stuff. Warning is required. So it doesn't work. Some of these how did they decide on these factors? Maybe I came to that one too late. I'm sorry, Stephanie. Just your question and the questions and answers now, and I'm not sure what factors you're asking about, so I apologize. Let me look in the. Are there any other questions about any of these other cases? Okay, so let's go to the last topic, which is ethics. So we can talk about ethics at the end. And again, it's my third time I've used this comic. You guys should check out this comic strip. It's really funny. So we remember Grokster, our individual storm giant. We know a lot about storm giants in general. We know about their average height. We know their average weight. We do all of that stuff. We beard height, how many gnomes they can smash. But we really don't know much about Grokster as the individual. And so when you're talking about these algorithms, when you're talking about these models, you have to keep the individual in mind, because that's what we're. So what does the ABA say? The ABA has an opinion. It says that we have to have technological competence to represent our client, and we actually have an opinion about machine learning AI. We should be aware of the biases if these things are affecting our client. I'm always impressed with the ABA. I feel like if aliens landed tomorrow, they'd have a statement about lawyers' duties to them, like in the next week. So bless them for being so fast on that. Let me see. There's two things in the chat. Mention here. Okay, so people don't know that Zoom link. Okay, so no one really expects you to to be able to build one of these models. You can ask my colleagues here who are all German economists. I can't program for the love or money. I actually think Python and R are tools sent by the devil to torture people. But you can still know about how these models affect your clients and how they affect the families of clients as well. This is a little bit of a sidebar, but one thing you should also know is that the algorithms aren't as smart as what the coders would let you believe. There's a notion called Potemkin AI, where the idea is that these algorithms are basically just taking data that humans put into them. So every time you do one of these CAPTCHAs, you're actually training an algorithm. You probably knew that, but you're basically training an algorithm. And there's an entire industry. I don't know if you're familiar with it, but Amazon has a thing called mechanical Turkers, workers who do these really meaningless, sometimes research tasks for very little money. And most of the time they're training algorithms. They're running these CAPTCHAs. They're doing little bitty tasks. And so later on, the coder can claim that they did some amazing machine learning when really they just hired 2,000 people to do a CAPTCHA for a little while. And so it's not built with this amazing technological competence. Some of them are, but just keep this in mind. Let's see. And so remember, I told you we went to, had the good fortune to travel to New Zealand to do a research stay. And I went down and spoke with Dr. Emily Kettle, who's a professor at the University of Otago. She has written a lot about decision-making. She's written a lot about predictive models. She's actually one of the people that kind of urged New Zealand to kick the predictive model to the curb. And she's a super cool lady. And I just want to read this quote from you because she put in a thing. You're so similar to others in the group that we've defined that the criteria for entry to, we're prepared to override your rights to be considered on the basis of your personal actions thus far, and instead will intervene based on the statistical likelihood of your future behavior. How statistically similar or dissimilar I am to someone else should not affect my right to fair treatment in a legal context. My rights are individual. And that's kind of the ultimate lesson of this entire presentation is your rights are individual. Now, I do want you to understand that we are predictable. You probably could ask your spouses or your families, human behavior can be predicted. We're not all unique flowers, but our rights are unique. Our legal rights are unique, and the legal protection that we deserve that good attorneys like yourself will give to people, that's unique. Even if maybe a model can kind of predict what we might do. So one of the ideas that we've seen to try to make these models better is the idea of explainable artificial intelligence, explainable AI, explainable models. This is from a DARPA website of all places. Basically, the idea is that you get these models, and at the moment, and this is how a lot of them look, is this top box right now, where you get a decision, a recommendation, and we don't really know what factors, what weights went in it, if we can trust it. And so a better model would be to have some explanation why we're making this recommendation, why you're getting this number, why you're getting this information. But so, like, what would that look like to you all? Like, can you think of a way, if a model, for you to understand a model, what information would you need? In the chats, please. Algorithms concerning risk of child abuse, ethnicity, education. So Elisa, if I'm saying your name right, I think you're getting at the things. What factors we need to know, Susan, as well. Like, what data went in? Like, what are the weights on it? How did they make this decision? Which is something that, like, I think you can see. Like, we talked about structured decision making in CANs before. You can kind of at least see how someone clicked on the box for that one. But these just come to you as numbers, and so we don't really know what's happening. It's that black box problem. Now, there is a limit to the explainability of AI. Like, some of these programs are pretty complex, but they can be explained. So I did want to look at Alicia, you had a question about, do you have recommendations regarding cross-examination led to algorithms concerning risk of child abuse? I don't know that anybody's done it much yet. So those cases that I cited were the only ones where people have gone after algorithms concerning individuals. If you take a case challenging an algorithm regarding child abuse, then you will be leading attorney in the country doing it, because no one's really taking these. And again, if there's Pittsburgh attorneys who want to tell me why they didn't do this, I'm amazed that like the bar in Pittsburgh has let this Allegheny County algorithm slide by for so many years without somebody challenging it. As a Texas attorney, as someone lived in Texas, I can tell you Texas is full of crazy, all the things that, but it's also, if you told a bunch of Texas judges and attorneys, don't ask for this number, they're asking for this number. I think I speak for all of Texas on that number's coming out. So, what did I went into? Whether GChat was involved in information. Yeah, yes. So we know what we've seen the algorithms coming around. One of the things that people suggest is that stakeholders be brought in, and that's what when we build in the models. And I think right now, usually when people talk about stakeholders, they're talking about people with lived experience, people in the care system, and I think those are incredibly important. They absolutely need to be brought in. But I've not really seen anybody reference attorneys yet. Maybe just they don't want us at the table because we're pains. But I think we need to be part of the building these models. I think we have unique insight into the way the systems work. Because we often are the bridge between these systems. Like you take a foster care client and you are fighting Medicaid one day and fighting placement the next day and fighting the juvenile justice system the day after that. And so I absolutely think attorneys, I think you all need to be involved when your communities are building these models for good or bad. One of the other options is that these models need to be accurate. Obviously, they need to be auditable by third parties. We also need to know that our judgment's not being replaced. These are all just suggestions, not being spoken to on high. And that is one of the things. Don't know if anybody talk about Pythagorean mystic religions, but these are not Pythagorean math. This is not math coming from on high. These are models that we built ourselves with information ourselves, and so the model is just speaking back to us what we've already done. And so don't take these things that just because it comes and it says it's a model or it's an algorithm that it has to be the truth, because those are different things. Let me tell you one quick little story. I worked in Texas. This is a map of the Texas Republic, which is still how Texas basically sees itself. And for years, I had this fight with this organization, Youth for Tomorrow. They were out of Dallas, and they basically decided placement levels, the amount of money that my foster clients would get for the placement. It ranged from like basic to intermediate to moderate, and each placement level was with a different amount of money. And to me, arbitrarily, they would always decide your client's getting less money, and then the foster parent would be, I'm going to kick them out. Like I can't keep this kid for less money. And so then it was a whole big issue. I literally wrote a memorandum of law about this stupid organization. So that's how annoying they were for me. But apparently this entire time, and I didn't actually learn this while I was practicing, it was after I came to Germany as a researcher. Youth for Tomorrow, even though there are humans that work there, is an algorithm. It was fighting an algorithmic model this entire time, did not know it was fighting it. And so there's chances are you might also be annoyed at an algorithm in your jurisdiction. I don't know where it is, but you might ask around. And it's possible even the caseworker, even the judge doesn't know that they're angry at an algorithm, doesn't know that that's what's happening. They're in the background somewhere. But I think we need to be more proactive in knowing where they are affecting our clients. So let's see here. Let's go to questions. I see a few things in the Q&A and a few things in the chat. Or the Russian sequencing the data. Yeah, that's good. So does anybody have any questions like ethics? Do have any ethical questions about that? Does anybody have any thoughts about ethics? Like, what do you think our ethical duties are when we're fighting? When we are dealing with an algorithm, when you know a model is affecting your client, what do you think your ethical duties are to it? In the chat, anybody? Yeah, Judith says, fold it to find out more. I think discovery fights, freedom of information fights are one of our first steps. I think we got to find out a lot more about these things. And again, some of them are good. Some of them are going to help your client down the road. I don't want you to leave this thing thinking all these models are bad and they're terrible. They might help us make better decisions. But I think we, the attorneys representing children, are the ones that are going to have to pick these fights. And so I kind of urge you all to go and pick a fight with an algorithm, essentially. So that's basically the end of where I was coming to. I think we're pretty good on the time. I would again ask you all to take my survey. It would be super cool if you could take my survey. If those of you who hadn't, if you want to send it to attorneys in your office that represent kids and get them to take the survey, that'd be even greater. So thank you for all those things. Does anybody have any other comments or anything else they want to say for the last 5 minutes?
So we want to thank Matthew so much for this incredibly thorough presentation. We want to thank all of you for engaging in the chat and for your questions. You can find this link to the survey in the materials, which is in the box folder that we dropped into the chat. It'll also be sent around to participants as well as on NACC's member webinar page. We invite you to join us again for our next NACC member webinar on March 22nd, where we'll be talking about practices to create anti-racism in the workplace. So again, thank you to Matthew, thank you to all of you, and we hope to see you next time.
Thank you all.